fleet of coaches have been waiting at the docks for the Monte Umbe passengers to take them to the south of the island, past the dusty building sites and new hotels, and into the hills to the NASA spaceflight tracking station. The station is jointly manned by Spanish and United States personnel and plays an important part in the controlling and monitoring of all American space flights. It had just been involved in the successful return to Earth of the first party of Skylab astronauts and was preparing for the blast-off of the second crew in a few weeks' time. In a separate part of the ground is a complex solar observatory.
We operate a solar flare patrol is essentially what it is. We try and look at the sun at least once every 5 minutes from sunrise to sunset every day of the year. And NOAA has 3 observatories. This is all part of NASA's Solar Particle Alert Network, SPAN. And with the 3 observatories, one here, one in Boulder, Colorado, one in Carnarvon, Australia, we can monitor the sun 24 hours a day. The Air Force also operates a bunch of observatories which overlap. So if one of our observatories is cloudy, they're usually receiving information. So we watch the sun from sunrise to sunset. We take a test strip in the morning of H-alpha and white light, and these pictures are sent to Houston via wire photo. They're also sent to Boulder.
There's a great deal of interest on Gran Canaria, but Monte Umbe had a schedule to keep and her own appointment with the sun.
Well, we've just seen one of the control stations for the Skylab project. You remember that this was an ambitious American project to put 3 men originally in orbit around the Earth for 28 days. A tremendous success. And this one station that we've just visited is one of several around the Earth, and of course with the support rockets and the launching stations, the whole project has cost thousands of millions of pounds. One of the most fundamental experiments that the astronauts have been carrying out is to look at the sun's corona in a way that we can't do from the surface of the Earth. The Earth's atmosphere acts as a very poor filter, and in fact we can't ever get corona under very good conditions, whatever contrivances and inventions we try to apply in our observatories. But from space, above the Earth's atmosphere, we get unhindered views of the corona. The cost of the Skylab project has been thousands of millions of pounds. If you look around this ship, you'll find that there are many astronomers and amateur astronomers who are bringing with them much equipment, perhaps weighing several hundred pounds, but costing very little. And we're making use of the 6 minutes of natural eclipse time to see the corona under just as good conditions as the astronauts get. It won't cost thousands of millions of pounds, and we shall get exactly the same basic information on the structure of the sun.
People say to me, well, you must be mad if you're going all that long way to put yourself in the shade. You can be in the shade in England. But you see, there is no shade as dramatic and extraordinary as the shadow of the moon. It is enormously dramatic. It is as if the daylight was slowly strangled out of existence right in the right in the middle of the day. You see, and the darkness comes, the shadow of the moon steals up on you across the surface of the world. We shall perhaps be able to see it approaching across the sea, and then right to the very last moment, just while there's still a thin shaving of sun left, the light doesn't seem to change very much, and then suddenly there's a total dark and just a black ball in the sky surrounded by a sort of halo of pearly light, which is the sun's atmosphere, of course. That's the atmosphere of the sun, which can never be seen, you see, at any other time, except during a total eclipse.
The hopes and anticipations of everyone on board depended, of course, on the ship being in exactly the right place at the right time. Peter Richards Jones maintained his readings and calculations with extreme care, and he, as a former seagoing officer, probably appreciated more than most of the others on board the problems facing the Monte Umbe captain. Captain Vicente Mirayeve was equally concerned, conscious that the entire success of the expedition lay in his hands, and that if the ship were only a mile or two off course, it would adversely affect the observations and at the least reduce the period of totality available. To complicate the problem, as Howard Miles had said earlier, the 4 charts of the area all gave different information, and there was no up-to-date details of sandbanks, reefs, or other hazards that might cause the ship to go aground. Commander Hatfield had made arrangements for 3 radar buoys to be dropped in the path of totality so that the Monte Umbe could take readings from them and determine her position more precisely. Neither he nor the captain knew at that time that the buoys had indeed been laid as planned and had already disappeared. Removed, it was afterwards believed, by local fishermen and never recovered. The liner Canberra was expected to be somewhere in the same area, and she was equipped with all the latest long-range navigational apparatus. But a radio message from her indicated that she had warnings of bad weather due at the same time as the eclipse, and so she was heading back out to sea. The Monte Umbe and Captain Mirayeve were very much alone. On the coast of Mauritania, in the path of totality, is Nouadhibou. The port has a small harbour and a few fishing boats with, a few hundred yards away, a dried fish factory. There's a small quay, somewhat inadequate for the Monte Umbe, and an airport that usually handles at least 1 plane a week. Apart from these features, there's nothing but sand, in great quantity. On the edge of the Sahara, which extends to the very edge of the sea, Nouadhibou was suffering from a prolonged drought, as was most of that part of Africa. There was no sign of either food or water for the cattle. It was from here that a joint British and American research group planned to fire an instrument package by Aerobee rocket into the path of the eclipse. Nouadhibou hadn't experienced such excitement since Mauritania gained its independence. It had been 2 years since a passenger ship had called there. But interest in and fear of the eclipse seemed completely non-existent, and there was only a mild interest in the arrival of so many Europeans, probably the largest number of white people in the country's history. Anyway, it was market day. Despite the inhabitants' lack of interest, the Mauritanian government were determined to make the most of the eclipse with a special issue of stamps and first-day covers and a specially printed commemorative T-shirt for the rocket scientists and other observers. In 2137 BC, 2 Chinese royal astronomers were executed for failing to predict the eclipse accurately. The Chinese had a formula for driving off the moon's shadow and bringing back the sun. They banged gongs and bells and made a lot of noise to frighten the darkness away. And it always worked. In 1973 AD, at Las Palmas, Concorde was stepping up its own particular noise as it prepared to take off for its historic race with the shadow of the moon.